We are back with chapter 3 of the book Awaken to Superconsciousness. The chapter is called Stilling the Waves. Meditation has much in common with science. Both strive for objectivity and both depend far more than most scientists realize on intuition. Moreover, though meditation takes one beyond logic, it cannot do so if it ignores the reasonable checks of common sense. The German philosopher Hegel stated the creed of rationalism in these words: all that is real is rational, and all that is rational is real. The fundamental hope of rationalism is that by seeing the reason beyond things, you will understand them, and with that understanding, be able to control everything. The expectation of rational thought is ultimately to learn all there is to know, an intolerable burden for the finite brain, and thereby to predict everything accurately. Physicists, unfortunately, for that expectation, are discovering more and more that there exists a fundamental uncertainty that makes it impossible to be absolutely sure even of such things as measurements. Scientists no longer expect to be able to predict the future, no matter how complete the information available to them. Nor, they now realize, could any imaginable formula make it possible for some super being to replicate the universe. Rationalism is simply not an adequate tool for arriving at the final explanation for anything. The universe, in other words, is no longer seen to be bound by the rules of logic. Logic and intuition. Judging the matter in human terms, the inadequacy of logic is a good thing from several points of view. One is that reasoning, unchecked by calm feeling, leads to pride. Another is that an excess of logic produces what has been termed the Hamlet complex. In other words, sicklied over with the pale cast of thought. It saps the will to act. Great scientists, despite their insistence on the need for objectivity, cannot but be enthusiastic about their work, in other words, to feel deeply about it. Without enthusiasm, they would never have become great scientists. Great scientists also depend more on intuition than even they realize. Einstein discovered the law of relativity in a flash of intuitive insight. It was only years later that he was able to justify his discovery logically to other scientists. The same is true of all scientific hypotheses. First comes intuition, which conceives them. Only then comes the painstaking process of reasoning it all out persuasively for others. Edison tested 43,000 filaments before finding the right one for the electric light bulb. His assistants pleaded with him after 20,000 failures to give up the attempt. It was his intuitive certainty that such a filament existed that drove him to keep on trying until he succeeded. Logic itself is a more intuitive process than most people realize. At every stage of the reasoning process, one is faced with numerous alternative directions and with countless others, no doubt, of which one isn't even aware. Without intuition, the sharper the intellect, the greater the uncertainty as to which of all those directions to take. Although one's conclusion may appear as the culmination of a step-by-step process of reasoning, it always involves sudden leaps of understanding, one at the end, especially which outstrips the carefully logical development. Indeed, without those sudden intuitive leaps, the mind would never be satisfied with its conclusions, no matter how reasonable they seemed. Coming to meditation and reason, effective meditation, for its part, depends just as much on common sense. If, for example, during meditation you feel inspired in a way that defies good judgment or that contradicts the highest teachings of the ages, you should be warned that something is amiss. Meditative insights, like the hypothesis of science, must be tested in the hard light of objectivity. If they cannot be so verified, they should at least be held suspect. Objectivity is the criterion of any search for truth, whether it be physics or metaphysics. I pointed out in chapter 1 that consciousness would not have come into manifestation had it not already existed before the appearance of creation itself. When people think of pure consciousness, they usually visualize some abstract mental state like the cosmic ground of being, a favorite amongst Christian theologians. The state they contemplate, in other words, is one from which feeling is totally absent. There is nothing inspiring, surely, about such abstractions. Without love, how can we identify that nebulous fog with God? Indeed, how can we think of it at all? The importance of feeling. If consciousness existed from the beginning, so also, and by the same token, did feeling. And if feeling, then also love, joy, and other feeling aspects of consciousness. As reason is a manifestation of the wisdom aspect of consciousness, so is emotion a manifestation of the feeling aspect. It is difficult even to imagine consciousness that does not include feeling of any kind. The intuitive feeling of righteousness or rightness that a scientist experiences when he discovers the right answer to a problem is what makes that answer meaningful to him. And through him to others. The intuitive feeling of rightness that a scientist experiences when he discovered the right answer to a problem is what makes that answer meaningful to him and through him to others. Were it not for the sheer beauty of logical but unexpected deductions in mathematics, it is doubtful whether anyone would feel inspired to become a mathematician. Were it not indeed for the feeling aspect of human nature, a case might be made for the claim of materialists that human beings are nothing but sophisticated robots. That KGB torturer mentioned in chapter 1 was able to tell his victim that she had no more consciousness than that concrete wall over there, only because he had suppressed all feeling in his own heart. There is no need to exclude feeling from the search for truth. Nor is it even possible to do so any more than it is possible to exclude consciousness. To attempt to be unfeeling in one's search is merely, to that extent, to dull one's awareness. Feeling is as intrinsic to awareness as heat is to fire. Both reason and emotion are the filters through which pure consciousness enters the physical brain and the nervous system. They are not in themselves pure states of consciousness. Pure love and joy are cosmic, not human realities. They exist far above the emotions as aspects of pure consciousness itself, Satchit Ananda. Human love and happiness, along with every other human emotion, are filtrates of intuitive feeling, just as reason is filtrate of intuitive wisdom. Pure love and wisdom are aspects of divine consciousness and can be perceived only in superconsciousness. Calm feeling is intuition. When that calm feeling is disturbed, as only the ego with its likes and dislikes can disturb it, it becomes emotion. Calm feeling is like a lake without ripples. Emotion is like ripples appearing on the surface of the lake that change the appearance of whatever is reflected there. To perceive pure consciousness, it is not enough to quiet only the mind. The heart's feelings too must be stilled. For it is in the heart that feeling is centered. It is there that the feelings must be purified. Until clarity of feeling is achieved, the meditator will be forever vacillating in purpose and will never steel himself to take the final plunge into the infinite. Without devotion indeed, in the form of deep yearning for truth, you will not feel the incentive even to try to meditate deeply. Wisdom without devotion is like knowing that there is a good restaurant next door and even committing its entire menu to memory, but not being hungry enough to go there and eat. The feeling quality is what makes it possible to commit oneself to the spiritual search. It is that same feeling quality directed outward through the emotions that accounts for our involvement in material delusion. The principle of duality. The universe is founded on the principle of duality. Everything in existence is balanced by its polar opposite. Heat is balanced by cold, light by darkness, positive by negative. In mankind, duality is found in the balancing opposites of male and female, joy and sorrow, love and hatred. Wherever one quality exists, its complementary opposite will be found also. They exist together because each is needed to cancel out the other in absolute perfection. The overall level of an ocean is not altered by the height of the waves at its surface. The higher any wave, the deeper its respective trough. Our essential consciousness, similarly, remains unaffected by our emotional ups and downs, pleasure and pain, success and failure, fulfillment and disappointment. But these are but waves on the surface of calm, intuitive feeling. The law of duality acts as much in our individual lives as in objective nature. Not only is every joy balanced in the general scheme of things with a sorrow, but that balance occurs in our subjective lives as well. Because our emotions are tied to the post of ego consciousness, every joy that we experience emotionally must be balanced in our own emotions by an equal and opposite sorrow. Every personal success must be balanced by an equally personal failure. Every personal fulfillment must be balanced by a corresponding personal disappointment. The only state in which joy or other positive feelings are not balanced by opposites is that of superconsciousness. There, the waves of emotion subside in calm, intuitive feeling. Joy, love, and peace are realized then as absolutes, not as relatives, for they are the attributes of pure consciousness. So beautiful. The further a pendulum swings in one direction, the further it must swing back in the opposite direction. As an alcoholic binge is succeeded by a hangover, so an emotional binge of any kind is inevitably succeeded by its opposite. People think to increase their happiness or their success by pushing their energy pendulum in the direction they want it to go, towards more possessions, greater fame, more intense pleasure. They wonder why the pendulum seems always to swing back in the opposite direction. Blindness, how could it otherwise? Such is the supreme irony of human existence that the sum total of all our striving must always be the same: zero. How ironic then that everything we strive for so earnestly should add up to nothing. The entire drama of life, with all its pluses and minuses, its ups and downs, its moments of hope and despair, brings us back again and again to the status quo. Nothing really is ever accomplished, nothing outwardly anyway. Only our gains are inwards in the refinement of our spiritual understanding. There come times in the ceaseless cycle of hope and disappointment when we feel repelled by the sheer monotony of it all. Finding ourselves no longer attracted by the excitement of a meaningless chase, we long for rest, but only if rest is sought within can lasting peace be really ours. Only if rest is sought within can lasting peace be really ours. Any rest we find outwardly in retirement, let us say to a quiet cottage by the sea, is as temporary as our emotional joys and sorrows. That peace ends when we come to experience it as boredom. When this happens, we set out once again on our former quest for excitement. And so, interminably, it goes on. The soul realizing at last that it will never find contentment so long as it seeks peace outwardly, turns within, and there, finally, in meditation, it finds perfect fulfillment. Beyond duality, fulfillment can never be achieved by reaching out for it, but only by stilling the active and reactive feelings in the heart. The ego, in seeking fulfillment outside itself, mistakes reflections for reality. Yet, you yourself are the joy you seek. In the restlessness of striving for it, you distort that perfect joy to which there is no opposite. That self which is joy can be found only when the waves of desires, of likes and dislikes, subside in the mind. Meditation is the process of neutralizing those waves of feeling by releasing the ego from involvement with them. To achieve this release, simply observe the waves. Don't agitate them further with the winds of personal concern. Gradually, the waves will subside and the water will come to reflect in its surface the clear moon of superconsciousness. There are different degrees of involvement with delusion. All of them, in varying degrees, involve the feeling of quality. The deeper the ego involvement, the deeper the delusion. The first degree is a simple distraction rather than an intense involvement. Nevertheless, it does constitute a serious obstacle to meditation. I am referring more to the impressions on the mind than to the reactive emotions in the heart. The impressions formed by sense stimuli linger in the mind to influence the direction of our thoughts. For example, I remember picking strawberries for a month on a farm in upstate New York following my graduation from high school. For the first few weeks, upon closing my eyes at night to go to sleep, I would see nothing but strawberries. Everyone has similar experiences. You watch a movie, for instance, that has no special meaning for you, but the impressions imprinted on your mind linger annoyingly, especially when you try to go to sleep or to meditate. These impressions aren't deep, but they are distracting. Feeling is involved primarily in the pleasure or irritation you derive from those impressions. If there are too many of them, then certainly they can add up to a serious disturbance to your inner peace. Try to surround yourself with impressions that will uplift the mind. An important result of so doing will be that your meditations will be deeper. Likes and dislikes form deeper roots in the consciousness, whereas impressions are like waves, rising and falling without special reference to the ego. Likes and dislikes have a greater resemblance to vortices. They draw feeling energies to focus in the ego. They define us to ourselves instead of merely distracting our minds. These vortices are the real bonds of our delusion. It is they above all that need to be dissolved. The strongest vortices are those of karma, actions, and the results we attract to ourselves as a consequence of those actions. An illustration may help to clarify these increasingly deep commitments of willpower and energy. Impressions represent the highest commitment or no real commitment at all. They may be compared to hearing a violinist practicing next door, but paying little attention to what we hear. Thus, even though the memory of his practice sessions may intrude on our dreams at night or on our meditations, they have no binding effect on the mind. Likes and dislikes have a binding effect. They arise when we reach the point where we shudder every time the violinist plays a note off key. In that case, there is a personal involvement in the thought, I wish he'd play in tune. There is even self-definition in the idea, I can't stand music that is out of tune. There is, in this dislike, an element of bondage, for it implies feeling rotated around the thought of the ego. It implies feeling rotated around the thought of the ego. Some karma is involved in this dislike because karma is simply movement, even of energy. Of the three, impressions, likes and dislikes, and karma, impressions are the least binding because they are primarily on a level of ideation, they do not yet involve energy. Likes and dislikes involve more energy, causing the mental ripples, both small and large, to rotate around the ego, forming vortices. There is some karma here. If our dislike becomes so seething, however, that we go next door and smash the violin, our flow of energy has reached the level of material action and is a stronger karma still, one that will have to be worked out on this material plane. Thus, meditation practiced for self-realization must be directed towards calming and therefore neutralizing the vortices of ego feeling. First, we must neutralize our likes and dislikes. Gradually, also in time, we must neutralize the specific karmas born of commitment through action to our likes and to our dislikes. Thus, we come to the classic definition of yoga as it appears in a great Indian treatise, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The definition reads, Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices in the feeling aspect of consciousness. Our material involvement isn't due only to our mental definition of the world as its apparent reality. In fact, the definition is delusive. It is our desire for and our enjoyment or despair of the world that ensure our bondage to it. Our first task in meditation is to still those likes and those dislikes. To some extent, we accomplish this end by simply watching our likes and dislikes impersonally while disengaging our egos from personal involvement. The Bhagavad Gita makes it clear that we cannot escape the coils of karma by merely not acting. We have to act out our outward karma, but with an attitude of inner non engagement. Thus, the impersonality required both in an intellectually honest and a spiritual search for truth entails not the suppression of feeling, but the refinement of feeling to calm, intuitive awareness. In calm, intuitive feeling, science and meditation meet. In watching the mind or the fluctuations of feeling, it is important to do so from the right place mentally. The practice of vipassana, that is mindfulness, which has become so popular nowadays, but it has been found in many cases to increase stress instead of decreasing it. Difficulties arise when people do their watching not from a place of inner detachment, but in a state of intense mental involvement. Vipassana is suitable only for those who have already achieved a degree of inner peace. This practice is unsuitable for people who are caught up in the hurry and excitement of busy lives. While watching your mental process, do so from above, as it were, that is to say, from a higher level of awareness. As much as possible, practice mindfulness from a superconscious level. For the conscious mind cannot easily achieve self understanding. Clear insight comes from superconsciousness. The following meditation exercise is adapted to that kind of watchfulness which produces inner calmness. Let us sit upright for this meditation exercise. Visualize your heart's feelings as a boundless lake. Strive to see, reflected in that lake, the full moon in the sky above. Ripples in the lake's surface and deeper vortices churning below its surface disturb that reflection. This agitation is due to disturbances in your heart's feeling, past as well as present. Calm that movement, not by suppressing it, but by seeking at the center of every ripple and vortex the undisturbed reflection of the moon above. You do not have to work to develop divine love. The calmer your lake of feeling, the more clearly and spontaneously will love and devotion appear reflected in the heart. Love is the very essence of reality.